is to actually follow the direction that council gave as a whole. And we have this, we need to learn how to park it at the street, that when the vote is done, the vote is done. And I think far too often, especially in this day and age, the world is becoming more and more polarized, and we're forgetting how to compromise. And so I think compromise is the sign of leadership as well. Sometimes you need to be able to put your own personal interests aside and do what's right by what the will and the want of the most is. And sometimes that can be difficult because we get very emotional about some of these decisions, and we need to learn to, as I say, park it at the street. When the vote's done, the vote's done. There aren't a lot of hard feelings. And I think you have to understand that everyone who goes into public service especially is trying to make that area of public service that they're in, they're trying to make the world a better place. We disagree sometimes on what that better place is, but we need to be respectful of each other. That's also another leadership quality. And we need to be forgiving for those we disagree with. And remember that they're just trying to do what they think is best, even though we may disagree with them.
And what was the vision for this city? Talking about visions.
Well, Abbotsford's uniquely placed right now. If you take a look at the statistics of what they anticipate is going to happen, Abbotsford's population is expected to grow by 35% over the next 20 years. Wow. That works out to about 70,000 people. When you consider that we're, and that's about 40,000 jobs. Between 35 and 50% is what I've been told. It depends on whether you go by 20 or 25 years. So that's a huge amount of growth. We have to learn to, we are one of the largest cities by land in Canada, but we don't necessarily have a lot of room for growth of population to spread out. Much of the land around us is farmland. Abbotsford has a policy that they will not take farmland out of the ALR for homes. Industry and jobs is one thing, and we need to do that carefully. But for homes, we have a policy that we won't do that. That means we have to grow up versus out like Vancouver did. Yeah. We will end up, I think you'll see a strong urban core. And Abbotsford actually is unique in that about 67%, almost 70% of us work, live, and play in the city. We don't travel outside of the city to work. It's kind of unique that way. So we have a good foundation of jobs being built right here in the city. And I see that will continue to go and encourage that to continue to grow. So I quite often think of us as a teenager. We have good bones, and but we're still a little gawky. We have a few scars on our face from blemishes, and our feet maybe have grown a little bit faster than the rest of us, and we haven't quite learned how to dress right. We haven't become that handsome man or beautiful woman just yet. But we're well on our way. And again, that's growth for what do we do for the future generations? How do we want this city to, I close my eyes and I think, what do I want the city to look like or what do I envision the city to look like in 100 years? Keeping in mind that my vision may not be the vision of everybody else, so that's where that listening part comes in.
Yeah, because you get approval from council too, right? And then the city manager and all.
Council and ultimately the people the voters themselves, the taxpayers,
yes, yeah.
They have a huge say in what they want this city to look like and develop into. So you have to, it's that fine line, you're kind of listening to a little bit of everybody and doing what most of the people want, yet providing that leadership of saying, well, we need to think past just 3 years when we get reelected. We need to think past just our own selves, and sometimes that, for instance, we made a decision the other day that was not going to make everybody happy because the traffic on our particular streets was going to get busier, but it would provide homes for into the future for other people that want to work and find places to live here.
How about you? How can you create outstanding leaderships? We have general idea of leadership. Then what is the outstanding leadership in your mind?
Honesty,
yeah.
Integrity, and part of that is admitting when you've made a mistake and when you're wrong. I think that, and I believe that currently, people are looking for those that have an opinion. They may not always agree with the opinion, but if you have a compass that you base your decision-making on, I think most people will respect that. You know, there's political sides where you don't always necessarily agree with certain policies of a certain party. But that doesn't mean you can't respect the leader of those parties, because they mean what they say, and they genuinely, they don't just flip-flop all the time. They actually mean what they say and do what they say, yet aren't so determined that they don't listen to the will of those that elected them in the first place. So it's very, I guess it's tough to define those when you're asking me about a leader.
How about you describe your leadership style, you know, since you become mayor?
Oh, well, that's a unique one. I don't take myself too seriously. I try and be able to laugh at myself a lot. I think that...
That means you're happy.
Well, it means you're happy, but I think we take ourselves way too seriously sometimes, and we take things too personal sometimes, when, in fact, you know, laughter is a good thing. I think also, though, that my leadership style is, I try and get people to come with me of their own accord, and be at the front and say, this is the way we're going to go, let's go this way, and come on, let's go, versus telling people that this is what we're going to do. Yeah, and sometimes it's a little both. But ultimately, I would like people to follow me because they really want to, not because they have to.
Willingly.
And I think also that comes back to that listening as to what does the public really want of their political leaders. There's many different types of leaders. And that requires that when people come up to me, I have to be able to listen to what they say and not necessarily take it personal.
Then how would your staff, you know, and your colleagues describe your leadership style? Do you hear anything from them or anything talk about you?
I would hope that they would say that I'm a team builder, that I'm a community builder. But you'd have to actually ask them themselves, because sometimes what we think we are and how we see ourselves versus how others see us is very, very different. So, but I would hope that that's what they would say, and that I am honest and forgiving.
That's very good. And what management culture that you intend to nurture in this city hall?
Oh, that's a good one. Ownership.
Ownership.
Ownership of the job you do, which means that, you know, for instance, if staff makes a mistake, if any of us make a mistake, I think it's important that we admit that we made a mistake. And so I believe that also means, though, if you want people to make decisions, you have to allow them the ability to make a wrong decision. Because we learn more from our mistakes than we do from our successes. So if you want people to actually make decisions, it stands to reason that all of the decisions they make are not going to be good ones. So I've often said for me, what determines a person is not so much whether they get everything perfect, but when they do make a mistake, how did they deal with that? So, for instance, someone backs into your car and you're both backing out. You know, was it who, and if the real thing is a neighbor comes by and said, you know what, I messed up. Like for instance, the other day, a neighbor was trimming a branch on his tree and the branch fell on, broke the other neighbor's fence. So he said, look, I'll fix your fence. Go get it fixed, my mistake, I'm sorry. That's a true neighbor. and it wasn't my fence, it was another neighbor's fence, but versus trying to find a way that this is not my responsibility. So I think you need to give people that latitude to make a good decision, when, if they do make a mistake, you don't, you know, as we like to say, throw them under the bus. That, you know, ultimately as the leader, I think, sometimes you are responsible for the decisions your staff makes. And the buck stops with myself or the city manager or the general manager of that department. And sometimes we have to take responsibility for that. And then you go back to the person that made the mistake and say, okay, what would you do differently? And how do we ever avoid this mistake from happening again in the future? That's very medical in nature. You know, people expect things to go wrong with medicine because we're all individuals.
Yeah.
But what families really want when things really go sideways is they want them to learn from that and prevent it so nobody else ever has to go through that again. That's kind of the premise of medicine. That's that art of it, is to learn from your mistakes. That's why we call it a practice. We're always practicing and striving to get better. I think that's very similar in any organization.
So then, share with us about a time when you faced significant issues and challenges in your city hall, even in council. Any special controversial issue that you face, and how you deal with it and solve it?
Well, the most controversial issue that we've had actually involved the homeless, where a decision was made, without my knowledge, I'll say, a decision was made that where there was a homeless camp, they had moved everyone out of the area, and in order to persuade them from coming back there, because the neighborhood was getting tons of complaints. I can explain all the reasons why, but that doesn't out. They took and they put chicken manure there.
Wow.
It was horribly wrong. It was not how you should treat people.
Yeah, I read the news. And
yeah, it's not how I would want. I think to myself, if I was to put my position, how would I feel if that? On every single level that this was, it was wrong. And some people say, well, but the behavior of those that were living there was wrong. Well, that doesn't matter. I can't control someone else's behavior. We can only control our own. And so for me, that was one of those classic cases where I had to stand in front of the cameras and apologize. And
it was hard for you too.
It wasn't hard to apologize.
Yeah,
but that wasn't hard. What was hard was the pain that had been caused and to individuals that felt as if they'd been disrespected like that. And that was one of those. The good that will come from that is that, you know, is that people will communicate within the city better. It actually, what happens in most organizations, you get what's called silo thinking, where one department doesn't necessarily talk to another one, and they didn't get enough information. They were so busy focused on how to move the problem that they weren't focused on how to fix the problem. And sometimes you can come up with really bad ideas and not realize it's a bad idea. That fundamentally changed the way this organization thinks. And in one incident has changed so that we talk much better. And I would say that we will become better as an organization on how we deal with people as a result of that. But that by far was the most controversial and toughest day and disappointing day.
Yeah, sometimes leader has to fight the bullets.
Well, the buck stops at the mayor, and you know, and that's a case where, you know, I just had, and of course everybody screamed and yelled for who actually made this decision. Well, it would have been easy to point fingers. That's what cowards do. They blame someone else. The harder thing to do is to take responsibility for it, and protect the person that made that made the call. Because if I was to publicly hang them out to dry, so to speak, would they ever make a decision again? What message does that send to everybody else? Don't make a decision, because if you make the wrong one, you're going to get you're gonna get skewered, it's gonna be, they're gonna feed you to the lions. It's a leader, this is a case where I think a leader stands in front of their employees, and then after, when the doors are closed, you go to the person and you say, what did we learn from this, and how do we never, ever, ever have this happen again? And how do we prevent other decisions like this from ever happening again? How do we make better decisions by talking to one another better, by having better discussions? And I would say that it, if any good came from this is that A, it raised the level of homelessness across Canada, but more importantly as an organization, that was a life-changing lesson.
How you gain the commitments from the teams over here?
How do I get my commitments from my team?
How you gain the commitments from them?
The confidence.
Commitments.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The commitments.
The commitments from
yes,
the team?
Yes. How you approach them, how you gain their trust, confidence, and their
Well,
commitments.
I think what you do is the mayor doesn't have all the answers, right? And as council, again, I'm only one vote of 9. Mayors have certain extra privileges that councillors don't, executive privileges. But I think really what you do is you ask people, what do you think? What do you think is your solution to this problem? Because, people, it's interesting. People don't work for money. There are those that have quit jobs. I know of a person that actually could have a job working in another organization, and this is in my chiropractic business. They could work for another organization making way more money, but they don't, because they love being a part of the office that they're in. I have another partner because they actually get responsibility and are able to make decisions. They feel as if they're being listened to, that their opinion counts, and that they're making a difference. And what it's interesting why people work is, and you can actually do a TED talk on this. The surprising thing that motivates people to work for us. It's one of those ones with the cartoons. And the first thing is that people want to be able to have to master something. So that's why, for instance, we learn how to play musical instruments, or we learn how to play golf, and we'll practice sports because we want to do that one shot where the golf ball went where we wanted to do that. We'll do that. We'll put up with 18 lousy holes for that one shot, right? And what the club did, and the ball went exactly where I thought it was in my mind and would land it. Or I was able to play an instrument and just get that chord just right, that one difficult chord, and get better and better at it. So you want to get masterful at something, and we enjoy that in our jobs too. We want to get better and better and better at what we do. The other thing is an IT term in Australia did a thing where they allowed people to do whatever they want day, work on whatever you want day, and it was an IT firm, and they gave people the freedom, the autonomy to do what they want. So people want to have that autonomy, and what happened was on that IT firm is more patches got done, more new ideas got created, because people were allowed to have the freedom to really have their input, so they need autonomy. And then the third thing is that they need purpose. There's a purpose to what they do, so that we're part of that collective. Why do we all do what we do? Well, Abbotsford wants to become the best city in Canada. That's our goal, that's our purpose. We want to become the city that all others aspire to be. Is that a big goal? You bet. But big goals, there's little goals are too easy. Let's go for, if you're going to set a goal, set a big one. It's just as easy to dream big as it is to dream small. So there's those 3 things that pull people together.
Let's talk about sometimes you spend some time talk about our beloved retired Mayor Ferguson.
Yes.
Yes, and he served the city for 40 years, right? So can you describe this leader? I mean, so he is a man of Abbotsford. So
he was more than the man of Abbotsford. He was actually and I've watched that and tried to do that. And he was the man of the people. And I try to go out, and that's one thing where I learned from him. I try to go out into the people as much as I can, because when you're out there, you get a little, hey, I got a problem with this, or hey, I've got an idea for that, or you get a general pulse of what the community is doing. The mayor's job, I think, is also to be the spokesperson for the city, to be the ambassador. to be the ambassador for groups. I just had I'm wearing a pink tie for breast cancer because there's a young group of ladies here that have raised over $1 million for our local hospital, and I'm happy to promote that because that's part of what a mayor does. Mayor Ferguson did a lot of that. He kept his ear to the ground, so to speak, and listened to the people. You hear stories all the time where he put on a pair of gumboots one day because there was a drain plugged, and he walked by with a shovel and actually fixed it because somebody phoned and complained, and they were amazed that the mayor himself would show up and do that, which means that you're not way up here. You're actually just all I am. I say to people, from the ranks I came and from the ranks I shall return. Mayor Ferguson was definitely very much like that, so I would say his leadership was one of the people.
What major leadership elements that possessed by him to make him, the longest serving mayor in the city?
I think he kept true to that. He didn't allow. He never allowed it to go to his head. The toughest part when people use things like your worship, sir, mayor, you have a tendency sometimes to forget that you put your pants on one leg at a time like everybody else. I think he also had a core group of people around him that kept him real. He had a farm. I think that keeps you. I think that keeps you linked to what's important in life. That you're. It doesn't matter whether you're the mayor or a hired hand when you're mucking out a stall. It's a job that just needs to be done, and I think that probably kept him well grounded. Again, he was a man of the people and showed up to a lot of things and listened to people well.
And Mayor Ferguson led Abbotsford through two municipal amalgamations.
Yes,
right?
two
and
of them.
one
Yeah.
border change, right? So
Yeah.
did you see the result exactly from that?
Did I see the results from
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
There was two of them. One was when Sumas and Abbotsford became.
Mascot,
He went actually from and then Abbotsford Mascot.
Yeah.
I think that what happened with that is that the people got to decide which mayor of the two at the time they wanted. He rose above the other mayor. I think for many of the reasons that it was considered to be just his personal style of going around town and bumping into people and listening to people was the leadership that the people preferred. I constantly keep that as a reminder as I go through.
What quotes that you are going to give to him? Any comments to him?
Well, he was one of the longest serving mayors in Canada. I don't know that there's anything that I could tell him. I've sat and listened to what he's told me a number of times. But I would say that he was a long-term public servant that